Zelda games are back to the brim with engaging content, but like with so many games, there is always even more interesting stuff left unused. That's what I want to dive into today, but instead of zooming in on one specific game and throwing every little unused detail at you, as I'm sure you've seen in other YouTube videos by now, I instead am only gonna give you the cream of the crop, the coolest piece of cut content in every Zelda game, one for each. And of course we begin on the NES, with the original Legend of Zelda, which isn't exactly a treasure trove of cut content. There's a Gleeok with one head and a bit of unused text, but nothing mind-blowing. So I'd say the most interesting is an unused room with blocks laid out in the shape of an arrow to the left. Its design tells us it would probably only be accessible from the right side, but on first inspection you might wonder how you're ever supposed to get out of it. Well, this block right here is pushable, allowing for an opening and for you to follow the arrow's direction. Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, does have some more unused material, but once again, the most interesting is a cut location, a full-fledged one this time around. This graveyard, which was supposed to be a side-scrolling area, is left in the game's files, but goes unused, despite a graveyard being a location in the game around King's Tomb. It seems likely this area was supposed to feature there. It is possible it was cut for religious symbols, being the crosses on the graves, seeing as Nintendo was quite strict with imagery like that in their early game making days. A Link to the Past is where we really hit a goldmine of cut material though, including graphics, enemies, rooms and more. I personally find the most compelling piece to be an example of a cut enemy, being a Hyrulean soldier that is armed with a portable cannon. Soldiers do appear in the final game, and with a lot of different weapons as well, like swords, bows, bombs and balls and chains, but never holding a cannon. Based on their presumed difficulty, I would wager a guess they were supposed to appear in Aghanim's castle, but that is unconfirmed. Onto Link's Awakening, which has a lot of interesting cut material, making it difficult to choose just one. I ended up going for something that might be cut content or an oversight, we can't be entirely certain, involving fairies, which did appear in the game but could not be found through a method that was planned. Originally, throwing anything breakable like pots, rocks and bushes would give you a 25% chance of a fairy appearing. The trigger to make this actually happen isn't activated in the game's code though, meaning it never does. We move on to Ocarina of Time next, which has a ton of widely covered unused content, making my job of only picking one thing difficult here. I'd say my vote for most interesting goes to Zelda's White Horse, which does appear in the final game in the cutscene where Impa takes young Zelda and flees, but it was meant to appear in the overworld as well. In fact, a screenshot from 1997's Space World shows Link chasing the horse through Hyrule Field, indicating it may have been originally planned to feature in some sort of side quest. Since Majora's Mask was of course built on the foundation of its predecessor, it features a lot of that game's assets unused in its data. One element that apparently was intended to be featured however, but isn't, is fishing. The fishing rod is still present in a pretty finished state within Majora's Mask's files, and probably the strongest hint we have is that it did reappear in Majora's Mask 3D, with quite some content to it even. Next are the Oracle games, which, as you might guess, has a lot of content unused in one game that does appear in the other. That doesn't apply to the Fool's Ore, which only appears in Oracle of Seasons and is only temporarily in your possession while you try to get your Rock's Feather back. Throughout this sequence, you don't encounter any enemies, but if you would, you could have seen this item is actually a weapon and deals 6 damage per hit, which is stronger than even the Master Sword. A very quick stop at Four Swords next, which is not exactly the most grand Zelda game and that shows in its cut content as well. I'd say the most interesting is the way the game tracks your score. So, if you're unaware, in this game you get rupees based on how quickly you've completed stages. However, Four Swords tracks this using frames instead of seconds, making it basically impossible to obtain higher ranked rewards, leaving them essentially as cut content. There is some evidence to suggest this is unintentional, as it was fixed or changed in the remake that was released on DSi. On to the Wind Waker, where for a change, our piece of cut content doesn't come from the game's files, but instead the Hyrule Historia, which features concept art for the game showing 2 islands that were considered but didn't make it to the final game. These include Stovepipe Island, themed around steam and smoke, with a design that has a mountain looking like a large chimney, and my favorite, GameCube Island, which is an island designed to look like a GameCube. Bit immersion breaking maybe, but super cool regardless. Next is Four Swords Adventures, which is one of the few games in the Zelda series to not feature the Master Sword in the final game, because it was slated to appear in the game, and why we know that is quite unconventional. So, the French version of the game still contains untranslated text in English, which was never translated because the lines are unused. And among these are phrases like "Master Sword ahead, don't miss it," and "Not so fast, the Master Sword cannot be easily gained," which suggests it was slated to appear. The Minish cap similarly features an unused weapon, being the Fire Rod, the sprite of which is left in the game's data and has the same appearance it had in Four Swords Adventures. It's not a leftover, however, as the European version of the game full-on mentions it in the description of the figurine for the Ice Wizrobe, describing they're vulnerable to it. In the American release, it instead says they're weak to fire. We continue this trend of cut items with Twilight Princess. Bomb flowers do not make an appearance in this game, but there is an unfinished motto for one left in the game's data. Now, it is possible this is a leftover from the Wind Waker, but the design is slightly different, so I would wager a guess that is not the case and bomb flowers simply were intended to appear in Twilight Princess, but were cut for unknown reasons. And we go back to handhelds now for Phantom Hourglass and then Spirit Tracks. Cut content is sparse for that first one, but I'd say the coolest is probably the mystery of this ship model, which doesn't suit Phantom Hourglass's art style at all, yet also appears in the distance in this pre-release image. Well, actually the coolest leftover file from this game is this image of the cutest dog ever, which was probably used for testing. For Spirit Tracks, I also want to look at an unused model, being this one of the Temple of the Ocean King. Now, this location doesn't appear named in Spirit Tracks, but it does in Spirit, with Link getting teleported here after coming across a gossip stone in the Lost at Sea station. However, in the final game, he is teleported inside from the get-go, meaning the outside of the temple goes unused, but this perhaps was not always the case. Also important to note is that this model is not the same as the one from Phantom Hourglass. Moving on, we find ourselves at Skyward Sword, which is, unlike previous 3D Zelda games, quite light on cut material. So I want to focus on something that was planned during the development, which you may already know, but come on, it's easily the coolest piece of cut content for the game we know of. As explained in the Legend of Zelda Encyclopedia, the game was supposed to feature a second quest, detailing Zelda's journey on the surface, presumably in the place of Hero Mode. However, this idea was scrapped, probably due to development constraints, but was the inspiration for the credits where Zelda's adventure is depicted. Man, imagine if the Switch remaster had this as bonus content, that would have been so awesome. Oh well. On to A Link Between Worlds, which is a spiritual successor to A Link to the Past. As such, many areas reappear in this game, but one that doesn't is Zora's Waterfall. However, work was clearly done to transform this area into 3D, as can still be seen in the game files. Similarly, the Lost Woods, which do appear in the final game, but with a different layout, was supposed to resemble the original much closer. For Triforce Heroes, easily the most interesting is a cut outfit, presumably from early in development, judging by the fact it still uses Link's model from A Link Between Worlds. It's based on the Great Fairy, giving Link huge wings on his back and feelers for his head. It's a nice little look, I wouldn't have minded appearing in the final game at all. And finally, we have the two blockbusters on Switch to cover, starting of course with Breath of the Wild. So many interesting concepts for this game have been left on the cutting room floor that I really don't know where to start. From the alien aspect to giant Octoroks, which eventually became Guardians, it's a lot. But my favorite is probably the reveal Link was supposed to encounter tiny people, probably the Minish, and even shrink down and interact with them. Probably the most heard criticism for the open world Zelda games is that there's not enough variety in the world. Well, this could have really helped alleviate that by shaking up how you see the world entirely, even if temporary. And it would be great to see the Minish again, of course. Finally, since it's a little too early for Echoes of Wisdom cut content, we end up at Tears of the Kingdom. The most interesting piece of cut content for me here involves mounts, and specifically being able to register them at stables. Just like in Breath of the Wild, you're unable to register mounts that aren't horses, like stall horses and the Lord of the Mountain. However, unlike in its predecessor, it is actually completely possible to do this in-game, it just doesn't let you. This indicates work was done in this area between the two games, possibly to allow you to register these mounts. Also interesting to note is that the Lord of the Mountain only appears in cutscenes in Tears of the Kingdom, so this suggests that was also possibly not originally the plan, with it potentially reappearing as a mount as well. And that's what I consider the coolest piece of cut content for every Zelda game. What's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel to stay updated on all my future Zelda content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.